Kia ora and welcome back. This is the video on analysing your box and whisker graphs. If you need help with any other parts of your experiments, assignments, or just learning about experiments, feel free to look at the other videos in the 2.10 experiments playlist. Now, analysing your box and whisker graphs is probably the harder one to do out of each of your diagrams. So you've got your arrow diagrams and your dot plots, and then you've got your box and whisker graphs. It's probably the harder one to do. So if you need any help, as always, talk to your teacher, talk to your classmates, and flick me an email if you need anything. When analysing a box and whisker graph, you need to look at where the minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, maximum, and mean are for the differences between your treatment and control. And that's pretty complicated. Hopefully that will get a little bit easier as you see the examples and hear more of the explanation. Your box and whisker graph is along this scale where this scale is the differences of the treatment compared to the control. So your minimum part of your box and whisker graph, that is the lowest difference. So in this case, the smallest difference between your treatment and control was 2 beats per minute. Then you've got your lower quartile, which means quarter of your data is here, 25%. And so quarter of your data, at least quarter is higher at around 3 beats per minute, higher than in your control. Then you've got your median, so that means half of your group are 5 beats per minute or higher in your treatment compared to your control. Your upper quartile is 12, so that means quarter of your data is at least 12 beats per minute or higher above the control in the treatment. And the maximum difference was 18. So the biggest difference between the heart rate in the treatment compared to the control is 18. It was 18 beats per minute higher. So that's what each of these parts of the graph mean. You've got your minimum difference, your lower quartile, so quarter of the way through your differences, half the way through your differences, 3/4 of the way through your differences, and your maximum difference. And you can see the statistics up here: minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, and maximum. So if the differences are positive, there is an increase in the response variable after treatment, and if they're negative, there is a decrease, and if it is on 0, there was no change. Now, the statistics we're most interested in are the ones that are closest to 0, because these tell us what proportion of the participants experienced an increase or decrease in the response variable. You can also comment on the other statistics to get the maximum and minimum differences and to find out if a majority, which is more than half the group, experienced an increase or decrease in the response variable when the treatment was applied compared to the control. Here's the example of how you might analyse it. So your point and explanation for that same graph that we just saw is that from the box and whisker graph, it can be seen that all participants' heart rates went up after consuming the energy drink. That's because the minimum difference was 2. So that means even the smallest difference, the lowest difference, was still positive. So even the people who experienced the lowest difference had an increase in their heart rate after having the energy drink. So you could say all that I've just said in your analysis. You don't have to say everything, you just have to say what the majority of the participants are doing, or in this case, what all of the participants are doing, because all of them had an increase in their heart rate. So the minimum difference is 2 and the maximum difference is 18, which means all students' heart rates increase by between 2 and 18 beats per minute after consuming the energy drink. Now, what you might want to add to this is saying that it's the minimum line in the box and whisker graph, because that shows the visual evidence as well as the numerical evidence of it being 2 and 18. You don't have to include that, but that's something that can strengthen your argument. I'll show you the example from the heart rate and exercise investigation that we've been looking at. So here we've got our dot plot and our box and whisker graph. So this is the box and whisker graph analysis. In the box and whisker graph, you can see that the median line is above 0. So here's our median. Our median is around 35. Our median's 36, which means that at least, we're up to this one. This means that the majority of participants had an increase in their heart rate after exercising compared to being at rest. If your median is above 0, that means at least half of your participants had an increase in the response variable. If it's below 0, at least half your participants had a decrease in your response variable in the treatment compared to the control. So to find out where the majority of your participants are, you want to know where that median line is. But to give an idea of what proportion of participants are above or below 0, you want to look for the statistics that are closest to 0. So in this case, your lower quartile is above 0 and your minimum is below 0. So that means some participants, the participants who were lowest down on the scale, had a decrease in their heart rate after exercising, whereas the participants quarter of the way through had an increase. So that means we have 1, 2, 3/4 of the participants at least had an increase in their heart rate after exercising. So that's 75% here. And here's our evidence. The minimum difference is -16, which is below 0, which means that at least one of the 12 MAT2I students decreased their heart rate by 16 beats per minute after exercising compared to being at rest. The lower quartile difference is 20, which is above 0, which means that 75% of the 12 MAT2I students increased their heart rate by 20 beats per minute or more after exercising compared to being at rest. So since the lower quartile is above 0, we've got 25%, 50%, and 75% that are above that line there. So that means that 75% of your participants had an increase in their heart rate because that line there is above 0. If this line here is below 0, that means that 75% decreased their heart rate, decreased the response variable. And that's how you analyze your box and whisker graph. There is also a template that you can use in the accompanying booklet or assignment that can help you to analyze your box and whisker graph because it is one of the harder ones. But good luck, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which is your conclusion, where you finish off your investigation.